So my parents had been divorced since I can remember, and the only times I remember them being together was when they would fight about something. In fact, it got so bad my mom resorted to calling the cops, and after that I wouldn't see my dad for months or even years. One of the few good memories that I have with my dad is sitting down to watch Cow and Chicken and Johnny Bravo. Honestly, I loved those times. I never had anyone else to watch cartoons with me and laugh like he would at the silly jokes and even the dirty ones that I didn't really understand half of the time. I never questioned why my parents had gotten divorced. All I knew is that they didn't get along. I would often blame my mom for not taking me to see him, but as I grew up, I started to realize that my dad wasn't exactly the hero that I had imagined him to be. I remember my older sister telling me that my dad used to have a drinking problem and neither my mom or dad could keep a job, and they would get into these huge arguments where they would start throwing things would get smashed, and they would even sometimes put holes in the walls. And sometimes it would get so bad that it would end up with my dad physically restraining my mom while someone had to call the cops. And this became a vicious cycle that turned us into a broken family. When I got a little older, I would visit my dad at his house where he lived with his sisters and his other family members. I remember it was always filled with smoke and was unkept and very, very messy. It was barely a house if it didn't have any walls and a roof. Everyone there, including my dad, was on drugs, and they wasted their lives away watching movies 24/7. They weren't exactly responsible adults. Most of them never worked a day in their life, and they would be late on their bills. Every time I was over at my dad's house, he'd make me these kinds of big promises, like we would go fix an old goat cart that laid in the back of his yard. It's cliche, I know, but it's true. But things like that never happened. Despite all of this, none of it really mattered to me because I got to be with my dad, even if it wasn't in the best situation. My dad was muscular, strong, funny, and I loved being around him because to me, he was like Goku from Dragon Ball Z. I know, it sounds crazy, but I would literally have these daydreams in which we would actually be Goku and Gohan as a pair beating up the bad guys, and yeah, I know, I'm a weeb. But as I grew older, I realized that my dad wasn't very much like Goku at all, and I began to realize that my daydreams of fighting bad guys with my dad was only just that, daydreams. When I was around 12 years old, I was living with my older sister because my mom was literally unable to take care of me, let alone herself, due to her own bad habits. And around that time, my dad ended up coming to live with me and my sister, where she tried to take care of him and take him away from his destructive habits, which she was actually successful for a while, and he was sober for around a year. But eventually, he went back to his old ways, and my sister had no other choice but to kick him out. I remember being so angry at him, and I threw away nearly everything he had given me. I was so mad. I felt frustrated and I felt hurt, but once again, I knew that he would walk out of the door and I wouldn't see him for a really long time. You know, I consider myself blessed for not turning out like either one of my parents, and when I was 21 years old, I ended up moving out of my sister's house and I got married. I was beginning a different chapter in my life and things were picking up in a positive way, but out of the blue, I got a call from my dad. I remember his voice sounding so bad on the phone and I struggled to fight back the tears. They were welling up in my eyes and I could barely even get a word out. Now that I was older, I was starting to realize that my dad wasn't Goku or Superman or any kind of superhero. He was just a man who hadn't been there for his kids, but for whatever reason, I still loved him. I wanted desperately to have a connection, you know, a father-son relationship, something normal. I managed to tell him that I needed to have a serious talk, and I didn't want him to joke around or pretend like everything was fine like he did most of the time. So once again, I went back to that horrible smoke-filled house that he was still living in after all of these years, fully intent on telling him exactly how I felt and how much I resented him for not trying to be a better dad. At the very least, I just wanted to know why. But when I arrived, he made me feel really bad for him. I could already tell from looking at him, but he began telling me about his arthritis and how he had other health issues. And in the end, I ended up holding back thinking, what's the point? And instead, I made the effort to spend some more time together, but once again, he didn't keep his word and I was left feeling stupid. And I came to the realization that he was never gonna change. As if it couldn't get any worse, a few years passed, my sister told me that my dad had been diagnosed with cancer and he was struggling to survive. I felt terrible after hearing the news, and I wasn't really sure what to think. Even though my dad wasn't much of a parent, he was still my dad. We ended up taking him to all of his hospital visits and we made him as comfortable as we could. As his health got worse, we thought that one day he would apologize or, come to some magical epiphany and he would tell us that, oh, he's sorry and that he could have been a better father, but instead, he just pretended that everything was fine when it was literally the opposite. I so badly wanted to talk to him about how I felt, but after seeing how bad his health got and what kind of shape that he was in, I just couldn't bring it up. At the end of it all, my father didn't make it. The night he passed, I remember rushing out of work and I headed straight to the hospital, but by the time I got there, he was already gone. My sister and I held each other tight and we cried really, really hard next to him, and it's just really hurt knowing that I lost my father, and to be honest, I never really had a father. And look, I know there's no handbook in becoming the perfect mother or the perfect father, and I don't think any child really expects them to be that way. All we ever actually wanted from him was to make an effort and, to live to his potential and show that he cared for us. And what I've learned from this is that being a good parent isn't about just watching Cow and Chicken or Johnny Bravo with your child, but it's supporting your child emotionally. You gotta give time to them and being the best possible example a parent can be, so eventually they could go on and do the same with their children.